Going to be recording. Okay. So we're being recording, and don't say anything offensive, if you, because people can hear. There'll be a recording of what you say. Uh, my name is Don
um,
Fitz. I'm the coordinator
from
for the
that article.
program. Let's see. Everybody, please mute unless you're speaking, because we don't want to hear side conversations or the phone or the TV or the radio. Okay. My name is Don Fitz. I'm the host of this program. We're going to be talking about defending public education, which has been it's. I found out since working on this program that it's very different in different parts of the United States. I'm an outreach coordinator for the Green Party of St. Louis. Tonight, we're going to hear about the near total privatizations of New Orleans public schools and how it has affected communities, teaching staff, and students. We're also going to hear that charter schools are often linked to right-wing forces that can be unconcerned with the effects of school closings, which can be very devastating if the school is closed in the middle of the school year. I think we're all aware, but we should always be reminded that this is part of a larger effort that we see going on throughout the United States to privatize Medicare, Social Security, postal system, and parks and forests, and affect benefits that everybody should have. And keep in mind that the United States is a model for Europe and the rest of the world. So as the United States privatizes and takes benefits away from people, we can anticipate the same sort of thing happening in other parts of the world. Charter schools can undermine public financing of schools regarding sweeps contracts, and they can have excessive lease agreements. But despite the difficulties of charter schools, it's possible to improve working conditions at all schools through organizing, negotiating, and even striking. And the webinar is going to explore tactics and strategy, especially for resisting school closures, which has been a big issue in St. Louis, where I am. Okay, our first speaker for this program is going to be Dave Cash, who is a high school teacher in New Orleans at a charter school. He's president of United Teachers of New Orleans, American Federation of Teachers Local 527. He's going to describe what communities, teaching staff, and students have faced and are facing with the near total privatization of schools in New Orleans. Uh, David Cash, and like I've said before, everybody will have 10 minutes, and Rita will give everybody a warning at 9 minutes, to wrap up. Okay, David Cash, go right ahead.
Good evening. Welcome to everybody who's here. It's nice to see some familiar faces. Hey, brother G2, and hey, Chris. How are you doing? Chris Barron. So I've been asked to talk about New Orleans. I just wanted to start with a timeline of what happened here, in case it's instructive for people and help to contextualize some of what I'm going to talk about. So let's rewind back to 2003, 2 years before Katrina and Rita hit New Orleans. Voters in the state approved the formation of the Recovery School District. Lots of states have things like this. It's called receivership in some places. It's basically a state mechanism to take over. It's sold to voters as a state mechanism to take over failing schools, so-called failing schools, and put them into, to write them and then return them to local control. But Houston's schools have been taken over. Lots of places, Lawrence, Massachusetts. This has happened all over the country. So at the end of the 2004-2005 school year, 88 of the more than 120 schools in Orleans Parish had met or exceeded the state's requirement for adequate yearly progress and were not failing schools. That's important to remember. 88 out of 120. 93 showed academic growth. And at that time, the lowest passing school performance score from the state was 60. So these were not failing schools. By and large, our schools were not failing according to the state's metrics and what they had asked the schools to do. So August 29th, 2005, Katrina hits New Orleans. And then a lot of people maybe don't know this, but in September 24th, a month later, Hurricane Rita also hits New Orleans. So we get a 1-2 punch on the storms. The city is empty. People have been either have evacuated themselves or have been evacuated. Largely, there's no one here. On September 15th, the school board has a meeting, and they put all the district employees on, quote, disaster leave without pay, which is a fictional employment status. Eventually, though, everyone is terminated. In 2005, our governor, Kathleen Blanco, who is a Democrat, by the way, I know that Don said that there's tied this to the right wing, but most of the what was done in New Orleans and in Louisiana was led by Democrats, people who are members of the Democratic Party. So I think we have to be careful, um, and look for people who have this policy, regardless of what letter comes after their name. Uh, so. Um, in October of 2005, our governor suspended the rules that required any school in the state that wanted to convert, it was not a failing school, that wanted to convert itself into a charter, had to have a vote of the parents and the teachers, according to law. And that a majority had to say they wanted to become a charter for it to happen. So Kathleen Blanco, with the stroke of a pen and an executive order, our governor says, never mind that part of the law. It's not important right now because people are scattered to the wind. So schools in the city start to decide they're going to become charter schools, the ones that aren't designated as failing, and they're being allowed to do it. Then in November of 2005, there was a special session of the legislature, and a law was passed called Act 35. What this did was pretty insidious. They changed the passing score from, having a 60 or higher to having 87.5 or higher. So moving this number, and they only did this for the city of New Orleans. They moved this, and as a result, the Recovery School District was able to take over 107 schools in the city. So leaving the school board to run five directly and then charter nine of them that wanted to charter. The school board's budget goes from 400 million at that time to about 40 million within 7 years. So you can see this flow of money moves out of local control and into state control, and eventually into private control. So there are a lot of problems in the early days of charter schools in New Orleans. Students are when schools realize that students can't produce the test scores that they need, they find reasons to expel them or counsel them out. And so lots of kids are just getting pushed out of schools as schools try to cherry pick for the students that will give them the best results. Um, as a result, the Student Hearing Office is established in 2013, which basically it's much harder for schools. They have to solve this problem, right? It's a problem they hadn't solved before in the beginning. In addition, because at first, when parents are having to decide where to send their school, because one of the things they did was they changed the district, the city from where being that as a student you went to a school that was near where you lived to being citywide open enrollment. And that meant that um, parents were having to scramble around to go to every school to apply, to put an application in all these different schools where they wanted to try to send their kids. And it was hard for parents to get time off work and run around and do that if they didn't have transportation sometimes. So the school district and the state create this thing called the One App, which is like a centralized enrollment system. So there's all these problems they have to solve to having a largely charter system. So and then also special education was something that the schools were doing very terribly. So Southern Poverty Law Center filed a complaint in 2010, and in 2015, a judge ordered a special consent judgment that we're still under today around special education. Although some people are trying to end the consent judgment, saying that everything's fixed, which is not true. Um, by 2016, all the schools in the city are under the control of the Recovery School District, making it the first all-charter district in the country. It's not really a district, but it's it's a state agency. But really, then by 2019, the school board chartered its last directly run school, a school where I taught, McDonough 35. I was there until the end of its being a direct run school. And then the district didn't operate another direct run school until this year, or till last year, sorry, this school year, then when they opened the Leah Chase School. So that's kind of a quick timeline of some of the events. I'm talking fast, I know. Let's see. There's been lots of community driven efforts to resist. There was one of the early ones was called the Urban South Grassroots Research Collective. That was started by Dr. Christian Burris, who's an education researcher. and who's from New Orleans and has written a lot of books. I highly recommend all of them to help understand what's happened. She has a new book coming out that's going to be really great. A group called VELA, which was the Vietnamese American Youth Leadership Association, I think is the A stood for. They were a group in New Orleans East that was organizing and was able to put some pressure. A group called Step Up Louisiana was born out of collaboration between people in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, but really it came up as a way for parents to build more power in the city and to organize. And it's today one of the best organized state organizations for parents. United Students of New Orleans was born out of the struggle at Cohen High School when students were trying to stop it from being converted to a charter school. There was the Coalition for Community Schools that was at first rallied around a few different schools that were resisting chartering, and then became a broader foil for some of the work that was done. So that's some of the groups that have formed. These groups, pressure from these groups led to opening of the Leah Chase School. I mean, we wouldn't have this direct run school today if it hadn't been pressure from these community groups. Other challenges that we faced in the system that people in the community have faced is transportation. The costs per child are, I'm sure more than 10 times, at least more than 10 times, if not more than 20 times more than they were pre-Katrina. And transportation is an ongoing challenge because every school has to run its own transportation and kids come from all over the city. So if you can imagine a block in one part of the city might have five families and there might be five buses that come there every morning to pick up their kids to go to five different schools. There's differing school calendars, and there's not enough high-performing schools for parents to choose, even though they supposedly have parent choice. The best schools are the hardest to get into. And also the school employees, the people that teach the children in these schools, even though the children are still the student population is still very largely Black and very largely from New Orleans. The school employees are far whiter today than they were, and far less likely to be from New Orleans or even Louisiana.
You have
Um,
1 minute.
okay, great, thank you. So I wanted to say that in terms of teachers, our struggle has been we've had a lot of struggles organizing in a charter school environment because now instead of being able to organize the city as a whole, which our union did in 1974, became the first teachers union in the Deep South to win collective bargaining. Um, we were a big, powerful union, but part of this charterization, privatization of schools was to break the union. They've been explicit about that. And now we have to organize school by school. And there's a culture of fear as teachers are fired for union organizing. So we face a lot of challenges today in trying to resist and fight back to what's happening in New Orleans. So I hope that was helpful context to know what's happened here and what some of the things we are that we've fought and how we've what we're challenging still.
David Cash, that was really good. I mean, it shows that the rulers of America don't want any disaster to go without taking advantage of it for more control and domination. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Karen Francisco, who's retired as an opinion editor of the Fort Wayne Journal Gazette. She retired in 2022 after a 40-year career in Indiana newspapers. Now, Karen is a Colorado resident. She researches and writes in support of public education, and she's going to cover the links between charter schools and right-wing agendas and touch on how the closing of charter schools can hurt families. Okay, Karen?
Thank you very much for asking me to participate. I'm eager to share this information with as many people as possible. In 2022, Carol Burris at the Network for Public Education asked me to take a look at a growing phenomenon in the charter school industry. They wanted to do a report on classical charters, which are marketed to parents in much the same way as private classical schools. There are private schools which have long followed an authentic classical model, but these new charter schools seemingly do not. In the taxpayer-funded version, terms like valor and truth and virtue seem to serve as shorthand for the quoted scripture taught in the Christian classical schools. You might recall a news story 2 years ago about a Tallahassee charter school where the principal was forced out for allowing students to view Michelangelo's David. In that example, parents who chose a classical charter school were enraged when their sixth graders were exposed to one of the world's greatest works of art. It's easy to identify the classical model charter schools because the term is often used as a selling point, usually as part of the school name. But as I attempted to determine how many of these schools existed or were in the planning stages, I realized there was another booming sector of charter schools promoting similar virtue-based programs, but without claiming a classical affiliation. These were a whole new breed of charters. They are frequently sold as back to basics, traditional curriculum with an odd patriotic twist. For example, Liberty Common High School in Fort Collins, Colorado, celebrates capstones representing the highest order of virtue and character, including prudence, temperance, and patriotism. These charters inevitably have school colors of red, white, and blue. They embrace the American eagle as a school mascot, and some made little attempt to obscure their appeal to Christian nationalist audience with overt religious symbolism. Another clue to the true mission of these schools, both the classical and patriotic charter schools, is who is operating them and who supports them. These schools are the darlings of the right-wing political establishment. Florida's Ron DeSantis is a huge fan. He's used his political influence to promote these schools. Florida Congressman Byron Donalds and his wife Erica have business interests in a chain of classical charter schools. Moms for Liberty, the right-wing group, started a classical charter in Charleston, South Carolina. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has promoted classical charter schools through an agreement with Michigan's Hillsdale College. Hillsdale is a key player in the growth of these right-wing schools. It's a small private college in South Central Michigan. It famously rejects all federal aid and has a long roster of conservative supporters. Eric Prince, the founder of the private military contractor Blackwater and the brother of Betsy DeVos, is a Hillsdale grad. Pat Sajak, the former game show host, is chair of the board of trustees. The college has hosted countless conservatives as speakers and visiting lecturers. Mike Pence, Clarence Thomas, Amy Coney Barrett, Christopher Rufo. Hillsdale is the home of the Barney Charter School Institute. It is the engine of the right-wing classical charter school movement. It provides the curriculum for dozens of charter schools across the country, and its education graduates teach or serve as headmasters at most of these schools. In our report, we identified 273 currently open charter schools that offer a classical curriculum and or have websites designed to attract white conservative families. Many are part of chains that we feature in the report. For-profit management corporations run 29% of these charters. That's a percentage nearly twice as high as the charter sector as a whole. Unlike the entire charter school sector, the overall student body of these charter schools is disproportionately white. For example, during the 2021-22 school year, more than 52% of the students who attended these charter schools were white, compared with 29% of all charter school students. And I expect that figure is much higher today. Nationally, nearly 1 in 4 charter students is Black. In right-wing charters, Black students comprise only 7% of enrollment. The most startling difference, however, is the relative proportions of students eligible to receive free or reduced price lunch. Only 17% of students in these charters are eligible to receive free or reduced price lunch, as compared with 48% of all charter school students and 43% of students in democratically governed public schools. So why does all this matter? In spite of marketing practices promoting these schools as tuition-free private schools, these charter schools are almost entirely supported by local, state, and federal taxpayers. There were some efforts to tighten federal charter spending in the last administration, but one of the few areas in the Trump budget where the Trump budget proposes an increase is in spending on the federal charter school grant program, which is slated for a 14% increase. That increase comes as the Supreme Court is weighing the religious charter school case out of Oklahoma. If the court rules federal money can go to religious schools, it will open the floodgates for faith-based charter schools. So are these schools effective? No one really knows. Growing research on achievement in private voucher schools versus traditional schools is increasingly showing there's no benefit to voucher students. You can look at the extensive work of Michigan State University's Josh Cowan for more about that. One thing we do know is that charter schools close at far higher rates than traditional public schools. When a traditional public school closes, it's almost always done with public scrutiny, with a well-considered plan for reassigning students. By contrast, charter schools have been known to close without notice, leaving parents scrambling for an alternative and learning disrupted. A recent report from MPE analyzed charter closures from 1998 to 2022, finding more than 1 in 4 charter schools closed by their 5-year mark. That means a kindergartner or first grader has a 25% chance of having to attend another school before reaching middle school. The report found the average failure rate of charter schools at year 10 is 39%. At year 15, it is 49%. By year 20, and we now have a cohort that tracks those schools, it's a 56% closure rate. MPE also examined why charter schools close. Charter school advocates love to point out if they aren't effective, they will be closed. But the analysis of charter school closings between 2022 and 2024 showed that less than 14% of failed charters were closed for academic reasons. Low enrollment accounted for nearly 47% of closures, 10% were financial problems, and nearly 22% were shut down for fraud or mismanagement. And for more on that, I would direct you to MPE's website, where you'll find the continually updated Another Day, Another Charter School Scandal. The bottom line here is literally the bottom line of a financial statement. Charter schools are a marketplace model of schooling, like any restaurant or retail outlet that isn't making it. A financially struggling charter school will be shut down. So what's next? As more and more charter schools fail, can we expect charter school sector to begin contracting? 6 months ago, I would have said yes. But the Trump administration loves business, and it loves the business of charter schools. There's a tremendous amount of public money to be made from charter school real estate and construction, from curriculum and standardized testing sales, school uniform purchases, janitorial and lunchroom contracts, consulting fees.
1 minute.
Remember, charter schools have no democratically elected school boards. They're not directly accountable to any voter. And there's also the fact that charter schools are overwhelmingly staffed with non-union teachers, which is why the owners of Walmart have long invested in efforts to promote charter schools. Another problem is that the Trump White House is slashing federal education resources. Research and data to show what is effective or how many special education students are being served won't be available unless states continue to do it themselves. And finally, there's the ideological issue. These right-wing charter schools are shaping students just as their school founders intended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Karen. That gives a lot of information which is new, and some information that we had thought, but we weren't absolutely sure about. Okay, next we're going to hear from Dr. Cassandra Ulbrich. She was on the Michigan State Board of Education for 16 years, including 6 as president. Her term ended in 2022. She has also been a higher education administrator for over 25 years, and she's going to explain how for-profit charter schools undermine public school financing via sweeps contracts and excessive lease agreements. And really, that was what I learned about sweeps contracts was reading what Cassandra Ulbrich has written. Okay, Cassandra, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. It's a pleasure to be with you and to talk about this very, very important issue. So, I wanted to mention, when I was on the State Board of Education, I listened for about 16 years as charter advocates claim that they follow all of the laws and they're just as financially transparent as your local school district. And so on my last year of the State Board of Education, I decided it was time to put that statement to the test. We had always heard anecdotal arguments contrary to that. And but we really didn't have the actual proof. They were just constant talking points. So we decided to put that to the test. And before I get into that, I just want to say, one thing to keep in mind is that every state that allows charter schools has different charter school laws. So what might be true and accurate in Michigan may not be the same for another state. Michigan has some of the most lax charter school laws in the country. So, the things that we allow in the state of Michigan, a lot of states don't allow, but some do. And so this is not unique to Michigan, but certainly something to keep in mind, particularly in your states, as your legislators are trying to reduce oversight of charter schools. This is what it can lead to. So here's what we did. The State Board of Education wanted to identify the similarities and the differences in financial reporting between, like I said, the traditional school districts and the charter school districts, and we used the Freedom of Information Act to do that. So we sent FOIA requests to all school districts, both traditional and charter, in 5 Michigan counties. And of those districts, 112 were traditional school districts, and they represented over 551,000 FTE student counts. And then 166 were charter school districts, and they represented about 80,000 FTE student counts. So for the charter districts, 117 or 71% used for-profit management companies. And in the state of Michigan, roughly 80% of all of our charter schools are run by for-profit companies. So this is pretty standard, the 71%. 19% used nonprofit management companies, and 11% were self-managed. The individual district student counts in the charter schools range from a low of 71. And I'm sorry, not just all districts, so traditional and charter. So a low of 71, and then the high was about 55,000. So a very large district as well. So on January 5th, 2022, each district received a FOIA from me as the president of the State Board of Education. A second letter was sent to them that did not respond by the first time. And then in some cases, a third letter was also sent. And so the FOIA request basically asked for 5 items. All contracts, so basically contracts regarding rental or lease of facilities, contracts for food service management, custodial service, lawn and ground service, and then any contract you might have with a management company. And the results basically demonstrated what we had assumed all along. So let's talk about the lease agreements first. So following the third letter, 100% of traditional school districts had responded to our FOIA. Only 93% of charter districts responded. So think about what that means for a moment. 7% of charter school districts did not respond after 3 FOIA requests from the president of the State Board of Education. They just didn't even bother to respond. Now, they did ultimately respond, but only after I named them in a public meeting and then sent the names to the media. Then they responded to the FOIA request. So put that aside, not even responding. So when it came to facility contracts, charter school districts were far more likely to submit facility rental or lease contracts. In fact, 68% of the charter districts submitted these contracts. And the reason they're more likely is because many charter districts lease the buildings from the entities related to the management companies overseeing the schools. So a management company that also subleases its own facilities to the schools that they themselves manage raises some pretty obvious conflicts of interest. But it also allows the management company / facility owner to set lease terms that may be highly, highly excessive. So let me give you one example. There is a National Heritage Academy school in Detroit that I first learned about probably 5 years into my first term on the State Board of Education. And I learned about it because the members of the board had essentially resigned after this issue came to light. So the school was charging about $600,000 for rent annually on a triple net lease. And we believe that they bought the building, it's a 10,000 square foot building, and so by now, over 20 years ago, for about $500,000 and invested, let's say, between $4 and $5 million into that building. After charging $600,000 a year initially, they raised the lease to $1 million. And at that time, the board objected. And the board wanted to renegotiate this. And they were told by the authorizer that they were not to negotiate with the NHA because NHA owned the curriculum, owned the school, owned everything. And so they were essentially told, you will not negotiate with them at all. So from that point forward, this school has been paying about $1 million a year to lease this building. So for an initial investment of, let's say, $5 million, NHA has collected probably well in excess of $20 million to date in rent. And they still own the building and they own all the contents. So the State Board of Education FOIA that we did not address the market rates of each lease, but we knew that this was an issue, and other states have identified this as an issue as well. So, for example, in 2012, the New York State Comptroller issued a report detailing how a Brooklyn charter school managed by National Heritage Academies approved a lease from a quote-unquote related business at a rate nearly $800,000 above market value. So that equates to almost $4 million more over the term of their 5-year lease. The report also indicated that NHA refused to divulge financial records supporting expenses that it charged to the charter school. So another issue on top of that is that many charter management contracts also include a provision that allows the management company to own all of the property in the school, even though that property was most likely funded and purchased with taxpayer money. So if that school closes, they still own the books, they still own the desks, they still own the computers. All of that is owned still by the management company, even though we paid for it. So let's move on. The next three were the food service, custodial, and lawn contracts. And this is where we get into the sweeps contracts. So charter school districts, particularly those that are managed by for-profit companies, were far less likely to share with us any food, custodial, or lawn contracts. And in fact, the charter districts indicated that they were not responsible for these contracts at all. And this is reflective of the fact that many of them engage in what we call a sweeps contract. A sweeps contract is one in which the board allows the majority, if not 100% of the school's budget to be swept into the management company. And the management company then runs everything. They hire and fire the staff, they provide the benefits, all of that is with this budget. So the board has basically absolve themselves of any oversight over that. They just turn it over to the management company. And once it goes into a private company, we, the taxpayers, really don't have access to it. In fact, in many cases, the boards themselves don't even know. So we would get these letters back from our FOIA requests, and and I'm going to read it to you verbatim. This is what it would say. The FOIA coordinator would state, your request for information contained in bullets 2 through 4 is denied because the Academy does not contract for food service management, contract with custodial vendors, or contract with lawn and ground service vendors. Instead, the Academy contracts for the above services through a third-party management company by way of an educational management agreement, and thus, the Academy is not a party to the service contracts. So what they're saying is, do we feed kids? Yes. Do we know how much it costs? Well, of course not. Do we cut the yard? Does the yard get cut? Yes. Are we responsible for that? Oh, hell no. So they have no idea, nor do they have to share that with us. So ultimately, what we found is when it comes to financial disclosures, the thing that became clearly evident through this FOIA process was the vast differences in detailed financial disclosures. So in Michigan, all districts, regardless of whether they're charter or they're traditional, are required by statute to submit annual comprehensive financial data to the state and a financial audit report. And while the reports tend to be very detailed for traditional school districts, that is not the case for charter districts. In fact, most PSAs report the majority of their current operating expenditures as something called purchase services through their management company. So the management companies themselves, like I said, they're not required to report detailed information. As a private vendor, there's no statutory requirement for management companies to submit financial reports to the state. It's also important to note that with limited exceptions, traditional school districts are not permitted by law to contract for instructional services. On the other hand, charter districts tend to contract with the management company for all or most of these services. So according to the State Board of Education, one of our resolutions, in fiscal year 21, over 90% of charter schools reported that at least half of their school's current operating expenditures were spent on, quote, purchase services. This totaled $1.3 billion in purchase services, the details of which could not be and would not be reflective back to the taxpayers. So, okay. So bottom line, as in my role in the State Board of Education, I mentioned we heard many anecdotal examples of this happening, but absent real transparency laws, there's no way of holding bad actors accountable for their actions. Not only is this inappropriate for a public entity, but it's also, in my opinion, it serves as a stain on all charter schools, including those that are acting in good faith and are truly interested in providing quality education for children. So if we are actually interested in parents making choices for their kids, they should have access to the information, and we as taxpayers should also be able to have access to this information. And any legit charter operator should support transparency laws. And so you have to ask yourself why they don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cassandra Aldrich. In St. Louis, I see on the news all the time how people are being forewarned against con artists using all sorts of tricks to swindle people. But it sounds to me like if I wanted to be a con artist, I should move to Michigan and run a charter school with a sweeps contract. I think that might be able to make a whole lot of money and drip a lot of people out of money and then not go to jail.
And it'd be legal. Exactly.
Okay, so our next speaker is going to be Chris Behrendt, who's an organizer for Chicago Teachers Union. He has helped organize and was president of the largest union local of educators at charter schools. The schools had 1,200 members at 35 schools in 2018 when it merged with the Chicago Teachers Union and went on to have the first strike against charter operators. And so he's going to discuss how to improve working conditions, even if you're working at a charter school. Chris Behrendt, take it away.
So I'm going to discuss how workers in privatized spaces can lead the fight for public goods and against further privatization, just to put a finer point on it. Dave Cash, it's so great to see you again. It's been a long time since we've been organizing together in New Orleans, around the country. Brother G2, I don't miss you because you're everywhere doing everything good here in Chicago. Karen was wonderful and demoralizing to hear your information, important. And that same Cassandra, like it's Michigan, it's desperate. I put a comment in the chat, maybe you have a look. And Don, thanks for bringing us together. So, and hello everybody on the Zoom. Thanks for making time for this. So I might give you a choice between getting hit in the head with a hammer and getting hit in the head with an axe. You're going to choose the hammer every time, aren't you? It's not a good choice. Not all choices are good, right? Segregation is a choice. Charters are a choice forced on mostly poor Black and brown communities. And it's not what wealthy Republican people who love choice choose, right? So I don't know, people on this call are aware of that. Let me tell a story, give you a little firsthand view of how I got involved in this world. I was working on a PhD. It was taking forever. I was doing the ACT tutoring, tutoring some alternative schools. Loved this population of kids. Got offered a job. I hadn't had a regular job in like 10 years, regular paycheck. So I took it, job in the charter school. immediately found out that everyone had been fired the summer before. Every administrator and every teacher. A couple of teachers got hired back. They had to apply for their jobs. Conditions were bad. There were no textbooks for classroom use. We were taking to a recycling center. There were no computers for my high school English class. Internet was often down. Copier was broken. About a month after we got hired, there was a business meeting. They said, "Oh, we made a mistake. Instead of us paying 6.5% of your pension, you pay 2.5. You're going to pay 6.5, and we'll pay 2.5. And if you don't like it, you can quit." So I was sad. And I went to my classroom and I was sad. When Sunshine came through the door, his name was Joe Sunshine, he's a science teacher. I said, "Chris, I heard someone just formed a unit at a charter school." This was 2009. I said, "Great, let's do that." So that's how I got involved in organizing in the charter sector. And I should say that, like, as Don mentioned, from like 2009, when the first charter got recognized, to like about 2013, we organized like, over 1,000 members and 30 some odd schools. And so we grew quickly. And there was a moment in 2012 during the AFT, or American Federation of Teachers, our national convention. We were writing a resolution to oppose turnaround schools, where, in public schools, they fire all the teachers and hire everyone new, and school closings. And we realized that charter proliferation was a part of this piece that we couldn't just ignore. And we wrote that resolution. It caused us to work in solidarity with the Chicago Teachers Union and built some important political bridges. And I would say what we came to realize is that, like, if you work at McDonald's, it's not in your interest to have a Burger King across the street. I think more importantly, we realized that, like, our employers, charter operators, are actually really villains, and they're exploiting not only our students, but us. And, paying benefits being worse, having to fight for union rights, as Dave outlined, like it takes a lot of courage, and people get fired. I've known a lot of people have been fired because students deserve safer seats, and they spoke up for that. And that was one of the reasons that they were organizing a union. So we came to realize that, we are public servants. We're there for the kids. Just because a charter operator runs my school doesn't mean that I'm a representative of some corporation. I think, I'll get a little abstract here. It's important to take charter and school apart. A school is good. A school is a community of scholars, teachers, students, support staff, parents, even the administrators who work in the building. Charter is something that happens outside of the building. It's a bunch of business people who parachute into the ghetto once a month to go to a board meeting, and they've got no relationship to our students. Like, my school was a public school before it came under a charter, and I look forward to it becoming public again. So we organized, and then in 2018 we lined up all of our contracts in 2016, and then in 2018 we merged with the Chicago Teachers Union. We built a lot of power that way. We went from 1,200 member union to a 30,000 member union, and we were able to strike for our students. We went on strike, and we won get benefits for students with disabilities, benefits for bilingual students. We won smaller class sizes, enforceable ones. We won protections for academic freedom. We won commitments to hire more Black and Brown educators. So we won things, built a lot of power, and right now that we're members of we're in the Chicago Teachers Union, we've got all of our charter contracts lined up, and we won some of the things we won in the charter contracts, like nurses, social workers. We use that as leverage to get those wins in 2019 in the district school contract. And then in 2019, we use that as leverage in 22 to get more wins in charter contracts. And now we're using those. And we just landed a district contract that's just amazing. That's got art and music, that's prioritizing extra resources for the poorest neighborhoods. And so we've been sort of leapfrogging, and we built a lot of power that way. All to say that the educators who work in charter schools are public servants. Charter schools like to talk about the charter public schools. The only thing public in them are the people who are servants of those students. And so it may seem kind of crazy. Why is a guy who works in charter schools here talking about the threat of charter schools? It's because charter operators are the real problem. And I'd like to give some time back, because I'd like to or hear questions or hear people make comments. So I will just brag on this, that since I told you about our resolution in 2012, since about 2016, there's been zero growth in charter schools in Chicago. And we've actually turned the tide. Not only are the number of charters down, but we recently, our board, of which G2 is a member, agreed to take 5 schools that were charter schools that were going to be closed by a charter operator and convert them into district schools, which is going to be happening really exciting. It's going to be happening, I think, the year after next. So, I'm honored to be on this panel, and I'm eager to hear what people have to say. So, giving back my time.
Fantastic, Chris. Great. Okay, so now a person who I've heard a lot about is G2 Brown, because I have never heard him speak before, but other people who have heard G2 really are impressed by him. He's a product of the Chicago Public Schools, and he's the National Director for Journey for Justice Alliance. He has been an education organizer for the Kenwood Oakland Community Organization. One of the things that we've had to face in St. Louis is that many people have said repeatedly, well, I just want Black children to be able to read, and the only way that Black children can ever learn how to read is if they go to a charter schools. But I'm not necessarily in favor of charter schools. And so I'm hoping G2 can say a word or two about that. And mainly, he's going to address the tactics and strategy for resisting school closures, especially given Trump's goal to eliminate the Department of Education. This is G2 Brown from Chicago.
All right. Thank you, Don. I appreciate you. And like, Chris said, I'm honored to be a part of this panel. I know a lot of people on here. I see my sister Gloria on there. And also, I served on the board of the Network for Public Education for 10 years. So real dear friends with Carol Burris, Diane Ravitch, and was proud to be a part of an effort to really build a multiracial fight for education equity that was rooted in racial justice. One of the experiences we had early on was uniting. I don't know if people remember the Dump DeVos campaign, but we united folks. Some folks worked on testing. Some folks worked on school to prison pipelines. Some folks worked to stop school closing. Some people worked on community schools, but we all worked in silos. And that was one of the first efforts where we united and we made Mike Pence break the tie. And while we didn't win that fight, we did win that fight because it taught us that together we're stronger and that our unity can no longer be symbolic. It has to be real. It has to be rooted in self-determination. It has to be rooted in self-determination. The reason why Black children struggle reading is because this system hates us. The reason why Black children struggle in school because there's a baseless hatred of Black people that has never been reconciled. And it expresses itself in every quality of life institution that most Americans take for granted. And so what I want to share with you all is a little bit about sort of how we organize in Chicago and how we organize across the country. And just my humble assessment on kind of what's needed to move forward. It was said earlier that we have to stop. We definitely need to call out the right-wing groups that are deeply engaged in expanding charters and really ideological charters now. But we also have to be very clear that corporate Democrats have done more harm in urban spaces than Republicans. Like Donald Trump didn't close 160 schools in Chicago, but Rahm Emanuel did, Richard Daley did, right? And I want people to sit with that. Like over 160 schools in Chicago closed. And in the year 2000, we were 53% of the population. Today, we're 29%. So it's not gentrification, sisters and brothers, it's a purge. It is a purge. And everywhere where the charter industry is taking root, the Black population has diminished. I want us to sit with that. everywhere. New Orleans, Washington, D.C., Oakland, California, Chicago, Detroit, everywhere you look, Philadelphia. So we are connecting the charter industry with the reshaping of urban landscapes, because in all these places where the charter industry has taken root, you also see the loss of affordable housing. And this cocktail, this horrible cocktail, is utilized to push us out of cities. So as was stated, I'm a proud son of the Kenwood Oakland Community Organization. It is the oldest Black-led community organizing group in Chicago, been around since 1965. We have about 1,000 members, and we have a lot of branches to that tree. So I was trained at COCO, and then that's our acronym, COCO. And then due to parents reaching out to us from around the country, they were experiencing what we had experienced from 2004 on. So I remember Zakia Ansari called me from New York, and she was talking about the fact that Bloomberg was closing schools left and right, and she felt isolated. I remember Sharon Smith calling me from Newark, New Jersey, and they had a plan called the One Newark Plan. And Cory Booker, corporate Democrat, was pushing that plan. I remember connecting with a group in New Orleans called C6. It was a grassroots group in New Orleans, and also with Vela. And then when Vela stopped fighting privatization, the organizer from Vela lost her job. Her name was Maria Harmon, and she worked with me to form Step Up Louisiana. And that's how, and so as was stated earlier, Step Up Louisiana is one of the most powerful groups in Louisiana now. They have branches in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Jefferson Parish, and they're aiming for Shreveport. So one of the things that we learned in Chicago is that, one, we have to have a clear analysis on why school privatization is targeting Black. School closings is targeting primarily Black and some brown communities. I'm saying that because there is a difference. School closings across the country has overwhelmingly hit Black communities and some brown communities. And I think our analysis has to be clear. Example, only 40 in 2000, the year 2000, up to the year 2013, only 42% of the students in Chicago public schools were Black, but we were 88% of the school closings, right? And so I think we have to have a correct analysis of that. The second piece is that we tend to always be on the defense. And I think we have to ask ourselves why, right? So say what you will about Donald Trump and the corporations that control him, the billionaires that control him. If they're nothing else, they're visionary. They're imagining a new world and they're moving to build it. So they're saying now that I don't have the right, you don't have the right to learn about America's real history. You don't have the right to learn about the fact that the Aboriginal people and all over this world were dark like me. You don't have the right to learn that Brazil is a Black nation with 85% Black people. You don't have the right to learn that ancient civilizations existed in Africa that were highly civilized, that had paved streets and light and people wore silk, right, and had public bathrooms, right? We don't have the right to learn those things because we're othered. They're moving off of vision. Our side, unfortunately, we tend to be on the defensive, and we have to ask ourselves why. And I maintain is that that same bipartisan failure to honor the mandate of Brown versus Board, we are also comfortable and complacent with the power, the balance of power being what it is. And so one of the things we started doing in the Journey for Justice Alliance is we realized that we couldn't just organize about what we're against. We have to organize around what we're for. And so we built a national education platform rooted in the local realities of our members in about 38 cities around the country. And so when we built that platform, we were able to build also a coalition called the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools, which brought together national teacher unions. It brought together SEIU. It brought together Journey for Justice, Center for Popular Democracy, Alliance for Education Justice, into this powerful national alliance of folks fighting for education justice. I believe that we have to begin to move our vision. I want to challenge us respectfully. We don't need to defend public education. We need to transform public education. And so that's why when we fought for Dyett High School in 2015, we created a model called Sustainable Community Schools, which dug deep into 6 key pillars and what helps a school improve. And the entire school community was engaged. And we built the vision for Dyett High School and 6 of its feeders. And we were able to beat Rahm Emanuel. And even though we had to do a hunger strike to win, that school was reopened with $14 million in new investments. And they just won the state championship in basketball a couple of weeks ago. So if I understand anything correctly, I think the way forward, sisters and brothers, is that we have to have a vision, not just for public education, but also an anti-poverty agenda, an anti-poverty vision. Right? Think about the last election. Did the Democratic Party speak to many of our communities? Did they speak to the needs of people in our neighborhoods? Most of our folk ain't middle class, right? Our folks are working class, the working poor, low-income people, right? And they were invisible, but they can't be invisible to us. And so we believe there's an opportunity now with folks activated to begin to build a quality of life agenda rooted in education, but also dealing with housing, food production and delivery systems, healthcare, youth investments, the rights of our seniors, environmental justice. What if we all united around a vision of a new world and those voices that have been ignored for so long were front and center?
1 minute.
Okay. It's a bold move, but we can do it. We can do it. And so that's the work that we're doing now. That's the work we're doing in Chicago as we've put one of our own on the 5th floor. We've taken the school board. We have an elected school board for the first time in the history of Chicago. And I shared something in the chat, and I want to make sure that you all look at it. There's a document. I put 2 things in the chat. One is an article from the New Orleans Picayune Tribune called Faking the Grade. Please read that article. It is the best analysis of the hypocrisy of school choice in New Orleans that I've ever read. And the second is evidence from Stanford University, the Schott Foundation, and I can't remember who else, that I think Advancement Project, that details that that across the globe, when you compare apples to apples, societies that invest in public education through an equity lens, dominate societies that privatize. So think about Canada compared to the United States, think about Cuba compared to Chile, and think about Finland compared to Sweden. And you'll see. So we need to use these things as weapons as we are politicizing people around the way forward. I want to thank you all for providing this space and allowing me to share this space with you. I want to say again that the fight is for public education, but it's about our vision, not just about defending ourselves against these people. It's more of us than them, but we have to become an us. We must become an us. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Juju Brown, those were very powerful words, especially when you're talking about creating a new vision. And we might need to ask where that new vision of a new educational system, of a new society might come from. And as you pointed out, it doesn't seem to be coming from the Democratic Party. And the Republican Party has pretty clear vision, but it's not one we want. So I hope some of the people who are making comments might be able to suggest, if it's not the Democratic Party, not the Republican Party, what party might it be that could develop the sort of vision that we need? Okay, before we get into invited comments, and there's a lot of them, I want to make a point of recognizing Alice Green, who's going to be talking about the next webinar that we're going to have a month from tonight on June the 4th. And then we're going to get into invited comments, and the first people are going to be Communities One Project, Carl Alexander, and I think that Brian Marston's going to be late. He was just elected to the St. Louis Board of Education, but he had another meeting to go to earlier. And then after that, we're going to have Ray Cummings from American Federation of Teachers, Local 420 in St. Louis. Okay, Alice Green, what can you tell us about what's going to happen on June the 4th? I think you're muted, Alice.
I just have to make a comment that I love the idea of a vision and going on the offensive. We don't need to hear more about what we don't want. We need to really come together on what we do want. And on that note, health is one of those things that impacts, it's one ball of wax. Everything affects everything else. But we are seeing a decline in longevity in our country, and we all have PFAS in our blood, and there are many toxins that are influencing chronic disease, and they're basically unregulated, and industry is telling us what will be in our food and how our health will be. We'll be talking about PFAS, microplastics. If you could put those slides up, that would be great. PFAS, microplastics, food chemicals and additives, which RFK touched on a little bit. Those color additives that are called the rainbow of risk have been banned in other countries for 15 years, but our Fruit Loops still have the things that cause kids with ADHD to have problems. We'll be. I'm going to end there, so I don't have. I don't want to take up too much time. However, in Washington State, we are talking about education a lot, and I really appreciate this because we really want to come together on this, and we will have someone who wants to comment on that. Washington, our state's a little bit different because our funding is our state funding is basically nothing right now. We're facing a lot of cuts, and now with the federal things being restricted as well, we are trying to organize a coalition of groups to fight the good fight, and it's very useful to hear what you're talking about tonight. And I think Cody would like to speak. And
okay, well, Cody's going to be on a little later.
Okay.
So, Chris, do you have the MP4 that you could show? The very short movie?
Yes, he's going to show it.
Okay.
So these are all things we need to work on. All right, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay,
Please
now
join us June 4th.
Okay, now we're going to get into comments from the audience. I'm going to take 3 or 4 or 5 comments from a person, each person, and then we'll give each panelist a couple of minutes. And I did tell some people beforehand that you would have 3 minutes. Try to keep it to 2, if at all possible, because we have about 17 or 18 people with comments and then feedback. And so we don't want to take into the middle of the night. So, though actually we're just about there. Okay, Ms. Carla Alexander from Communities One Project. Can you give us your question or comment for the speakers?
Yes, Don, I want to know if I can make the few comments you wanted me to talk about Hawaii.
Who's this?
Nikhil Ananda from Hawaii.
Yeah, okay, Nikhil, yes, but later. We're looking at Ms. Alexander now. You are on the stack. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fitz. We're okay about switching it around if we need to.
Go right ahead.
Okay, well, we have a comment. We kind of wrote something out. Initially, this webinar was titled "The Threat of Charter Schools." Let's define the word threat. A threat is an expression or an intention to inflict evil, injury, or damage. Now, all of the speakers tonight have clearly expressed in some way that charter schools are a threat, because if these businesses or these business model charter schools are opening and expanding, and knowing that they are draining funding and resources away from democratically run public education, to us, that is intentional at its best. So we feel for you if you're working at a charter school, if your child is enrolled in a charter school, or if you are associated with a charter school or sponsor a charter school. Are we really doing enough for democratically run public education? Have we become complacent because we can pay our bills and we should all get along? All of the activists and democratically run public education proponents on this call know that there is no compromise when you are protecting yourself or protecting someone or something from harm or danger. So if we want to transform public education, like Mr. Jitu Brown just outlined, we must make some uncomfortable moves to put an end to the expansion and the opening of charter schools, and put 100% energy in the vision to transform public education. So we need to stop fooling ourselves, because anything else is unacceptable. Thank you so much.
You're on
John,
mute,
you're on
Don.
mute.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alexander. Let's see. Brian Marston, are you on yet? I know that he was going to be late, and so we're looking for him. Okay, so next we're going to go right to Ray Cummins. Ray, could you have a question or comment for a couple of minutes?
First thing I want to say, thank you, Don, for putting on this event tonight. It's been very informative. I read in the chat where someone said something about political parties. It's pretty clear to me. We have to create a movement. Brother Brown, you're absolutely correct. We have to have that vision. We know what works in these situations. It's full service community schools with wraparound service. We know what works. We know what is going to be that transformation and that vision. And those folks, those corporate folks, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or whoever they are, this is a money-making opportunity for them. And who do they make it off of? They make it off of families and children that come from poor, impoverished neighborhoods under the disguise of, we're going to solve your problem. We're going to make sure everything is taken care of. Well, the only thing they do is they stay open for a while, they build up these big bank accounts, and then when they close, nobody knows where the furniture goes or anything else. So full service community schools beginning at pre-K with wraparound services. Now let's get something's called tonight.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, next we're going to hear from Chris Mann of the Missouri Green Party, Paul Lehman after Chris, the Mid-Missouri Green Party, Paul Lehman, and then Zaki Baroudi of the Universal African Peoples Organization. Chris Mann, could you say a few words for just 2 minutes?
Oh, Don, you said 3 minutes.
I know I'm chopping one off, so we get to Nikhil Ananda, who's further on down the list.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I better get going. I'm making this comment tonight based on my experience as a special education classroom teacher in both Kansas City and St. Louis public school systems. Currently in Kansas City, the charters and the public schools service students nearly on a 50-50 basis. In Missouri, a statute declares that charter schools are public schools, which means that when a student leaves one district, the money allotted to them follows them. So here's the reality, though. There's an economic principle called economy of scale. It's less expensive to operate one school system rather than two with the total money available. So people have the speakers have covered very well that the school boards lack accountability at all. And nobody, even on this planning of the webinar, nobody even knew if each charter school has its own superintendent and where the money goes with regard to the teaching of the children. And on a teacher level, in January and February, when students start our practice testing for the MAP tests, the ones that are supposed to be the best, special education students are sent to public schools so
30
that,
seconds.
oh my gosh, so that test scores look better from the charter schools. This is a
Chris,
disruption.
30 seconds.
This is a disruption mainly to the special needs students who need routines and they need to feel safe with familiar faces and friends. And so the students are themselves faced with navigating a new school building, all new teachers, and they do not even know familiar people such as the secretary, the school nurse, or the custodians. So I had a student who refused to go to class the first day. She entered from a charter school. And in my hindsight opinion, while preparing this comment, she was experiencing extreme anxiety in her new environment, and another staff member tried to force her to come to class, and that erupted into an unnecessary conflict and very bad feelings on the part of the student. So how many seconds do I have? I want to end with this quote. While marching in 2011 in Washington, D.C., it was a demonstration. And Jonathan Kozol was there. He's a longtime educator. And he spoke and said the niche effect of charter schools guarantees a swift and vicious deepening of class and racial separation. Do we really want that? Not at all.
Okay, very good. Okay, Chris, you graciously accepted that my whacking a minute off. Okay, now we're going to go on to Paul Lehman from the Mid-Missouri Green Party, and let our panelists each have a couple of minutes to respond to whatever they want to, and then we'll take it up again with Zaki Baroudi of the UAPO. Okay, Paul Lehman, go ahead.
I'm from Fayette, Missouri, Central Missouri. In a couple years, or several years ago now, I sued the local Howard County Fayette R3 school district for converting to a 4-day school week. And the basis for that was, as Zitu Brown was alluding to, was the quality of education. And I want to read what the Constitution of Missouri says and has said from the first one in 1821. A general diffusion of knowledge and intelligence being essential to the preservation of the rights and liberties of people, the General Assembly shall establish and maintain free public schools for the gratuitous instruction of all persons in this state within ages not in excess of 21 and as prescribed by law. The point is that my suit was based on the quality of education. There's another law that refers to that, and so I just point out that we are not only up against the attitude about charter schools, but we're against the courts in Missouri that have ruled that you cannot sue a district based on the quality or the lack of quality of education. So we've got quite a challenge.
Okay, great. Okay, now I want to ask members of the panel for any thoughts they've had responding to anything that any person has said. Okay, Dave Cash, any thoughts?
I mean, I just appreciate that everybody's naming the lines we need to draw in the sand, and that this is a fight for racial justice. Like, that's really important. I didn't say that. I mentioned it a little bit, and I referred to some studies in the chat that talk about the particular damage in New Orleans that Black communities, Black students, Black teachers, and Black administrators have faced as a result of this. So yeah, let's keep making sure we're centering that as part of the struggle.
Okay, Karen Francisco, do you have a 2 or 3 minute comment?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear all of these examples of charter school situations in various states and cities. But one thing you shouldn't forget is there absolutely is a coordinated effort here. There is a group called the American Legislative Exchange Council. It's a group of mostly conservative state lawmakers from across the country. They go to these conferences each year and are wined and dined by corporate representatives who literally write model legislation on a host of topics. And one of their favorite is education. So a lot of these plans where we've seen rules to change the authorization of school boards, these have all come out of ALEC. They share ideas. And I mean, I think we really do need to connect the dots here and be aware of what they're doing in one state, because chances are it's going to be showing up in another state and in another form. So don't overlook ALEC. It is a dangerous organization.
Yeah, they figure out how to change the laws without being overturned by the courts and spend a lot of time doing it. Okay, next we're going to go to Cassandra Ulbrich. Do you have 2 or 3 minutes that you would like to respond?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for your comments, and it's always important to hear what's happening in other states. The other thing I would just have people keep in mind is there's a court case going on in the Supreme Court right now, and that could upend every conversation we're having at the moment, which would basically allow for religious charter schools. And really the debate comes down to, are they public schools? Are they private entities, et cetera, et cetera? There's going to be ramifications regardless of which side the court comes down on. And so I think we need to kind of pay attention to what's happening there. And regardless of what the end result is, there's going to be a lot more coming down the pike after that. So the conversation we're having now could turn into something completely different in the very near future.
Thank you very much. Okay, Chris Barron.
Yeah, I'll just say that I really appreciate all the very thoughtful, well-informed comments, in person in the chat. And I want to say that, like, let's remember that, we're fighting for something good. Like, rich people don't enjoy their money. You've met rich people, they're miserable. It doesn't not making them happy. Like, a world of more equality is like going to be good for everybody. Ending poverty makes us all richer. Ending racism is going to unleash potentialities and joys, and it's going to make us all richer, and it's going to make life better. So let's keep our mind on the positive. Let's not pick fights with parents who send their kids to charter schools, the workers who are there. It's the people making the money that are laughing all the way to the bank. They're not laughing, they're crying because they're not enjoying their money. So let's stop giving it to them, and let's build forces and maintain public control over public goods. It's good for everybody except a few of them.
Okay, fantastic. I feel sorry for the rich too, so we ought to quit letting them be rich. Okay. G2 Brown. Yeah. Is G2 here?
I think he left, Don.
Okay, good enough. Okay, let's go to our next comment is from Zaki Baroudi of the Universal African Peoples Organization. And then I don't think anybody's here from the Ecumenical Leadership Council, but we'll have somebody from Green Social Thought. Okay. Go ahead, Zaki.
All right, real quick, I just want to compliment the panelists. They brought out some very great statistics as well as what must be as exposing the con artists of the charter schools. I'm a former educator myself, and I really like what the brother who is no longer on with us, a brother named Brown, in terms of as far as the overall educational system, it must be a greater investment in equitable education. As a former educator, I've penned two booklets, one entitled Challenge the Building of a Clean, Prosperous Black Community Through Our Educational System, as opposed to the conspiracy, and the second one, the challenge part two, Can We Do It? And I make mention of that because even though we have to be cracking on these charter schools, there must also be great transformation in the public schools as relates to teaching all children the great history of Black people, as well as directing the students into skilled professions such as biologists, engineers, architects, and etc., which is a great failure of the public school system. And with more money in the public school system and with a vision, and I love the idea of a vision because we all, those who say and see the kind of social injustices that occur, that we have to work for a new vision, and that vision is a new world order based on social equity and racial justice. So again, I just want to commend the panelists. And one other thing, real quick, if one of the panelists was making mention of 25% of the charter schools fail because of financial mismanagement or fraud, just imagine that being the occurrence of financial fraud in the public schools and the kind of media play that would be centered around those kinds of failures in the public schools. So it's a lot of scam artists, but there's scams on so many levels in this present society that we're in.
Okay, Zaki, thank you very much. Now, I want to see if anybody from the Ecumenical Leadership Council is here. Okay. Well, nobody here from the Ecumenical Leadership Council. Okay. Well, we're going to go to the Green Social Thought, and then I want to hear from Brian Marston, who was just elected to the school board of the city of St. Louis. Let's see. Green Social Thought, Elizabeth Fatah. Go right ahead.
You're muted, Elizabeth.
Just a second.
There you go.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. I have a question and sort of a comment. The question is, what do people think of magnet schools?
Go ahead.
Yeah, keep
going.
Oh, I should continue. All right, that's a question. and okay, that's the question of magnet school. The other one is a kind of comment. My children we lived abroad, so I don't have much to really personally have much about the education system, except most of the schools that they went to abroad were American oriented, except there were some British. But what I found is that they were very test oriented. And this is what I wanted to, the British schools were different. They were more child oriented, I felt. And this is what I guess I want to bring up the question of John Dewey and Montessori, who believe that schools, especially for younger children, should be oriented toward them and their social environment. And what I'm wondering is, that people are leaving public schools for many reasons, and perhaps not the correct reasons. And of course, we're taking advantages, people who have money, usually, and the present system that we have. But is there something that we could do with American education? And especially, I'm wondering about
30 seconds left.
Am I saying too much? Okay. Anyway, that's it. If you make comments on that and John Dewey and Montessori and how they were child oriented in teaching.
Okay. We're going to go to Brian Marston, who was.
Nobody is answering that?
Well, we're taking several people, and then
okay. All right.
the speakers will be able to answer whichever comments they want to. Okay, I want to hear from Brian Marston, and then we're going to hear from Rachel Bratton with the Green Party of Minnesota. Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Hi, and I apologize for being late. I just got back from the Educator of the Year Awards for SLPS, which is very inspiring to see all the great teachers that we have in our public school district. So I don't know what's already been discussed, but I'll just say that the charter schools are designed to siphon students and money out of St. Louis public schools, and it's all based on the notion that schools should be run like a business. And it's sort of what that ends up meaning is that if the money ends up with a small number of people, and this charter schools don't really deliver a better education for the students. If you look at, say, the standardized test scores in general, they're not any better at the charter schools than they are at the public schools. And they talk about innovation, and they've had more than 25 years in St. Louis to innovate and to iterate every year and come up with better and better ways of doing things. But I haven't seen what the amazing model of education that we should all be following that came out of charter schools is. So I don't know, all that said, it's not the only issue facing St. Louis public schools, but it's a big one. And so I just wanted to say hi to Don and Digger and Gloria, Mr. and Mrs. Alexander and Ray and Isaac and Tracy and anybody else that I missed.
Otherwise I would leave. It was very boring.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Okay.
Hey, Don, can I make super quick comment? I gave back a couple minutes. That was super quick, just to what Brian said.
Yeah.
So, Brian, I thank you for what you said. This is what I like to say. Hey, I just got a call from my buddy, Brian. Your house is on fire. Oh my God. Hey, check it out. I've got an app. It's got like a really good fire. We're going to find a fire department that suits your needs, that appeals to your personal. You're like, screw that. You want every fire department should put out every fire, right? It's too important, right? Schools should be the same way. It's not like you need to school every school. And to your point, my colleague's point about magnet schools, like it's segregating students by their ability level. Like every school, you should go to your community school, and it should be the right place with all the resources for everyone who lives in that community. And we should live in communities that are racially and economically mixed. And anyway, I thought that analogy might be helpful in comments and discussions with people.
Okay, great. Before we hear from Rachel Bratton of the Green Party of Minnesota, I just want to comment that the Green Party of St. Louis has a unique relationship with Brian Marston, which is very unusual, which is never talked about with charter schools. And that is since Brian was elected, he's promised to put forward a motion in the public school district to end the use of pesticides in the landscaping company, which is a topic dear to the Green Party, to stop using herbicides. And the question then becomes, we can do this for the public schools and we can advocate this, but in general, charter schools, you can't tell them what to do. In Missouri, they're completely independent. And if they want to use any sort of chemical poisons, they can. The school board doesn't have anything to say about it. Okay, so we're going to go on to Rachel Bratton from the Green Party of Minnesota. And then after that, we'll hear from, after we have comments from the panel, we'll hear from Maureen Doyle of the Green Rainbow Party of Massachusetts. Okay, Rachel?
So I first want to say that I'm a homeschooler. I haven't had to deal with public schools or charter schools or any schools because I've been homeschooling my kid this whole time. And here's some evidence of art. Um, but one of the things I know is that the schools that are out in the burbs more tend to get higher scores, and the schools that are like in the city more, and I'm talking about public schools, um, they tend to get poorer scores. And I think that there's an issue about funding that hasn't been discussed regarding public schools, because the funding is primarily, based on property taxes. And the suburbs have a tendency to get more funding. And yeah, inside the city, there's actually more children to school. So like the pieces of pie are smaller for each child, if that makes sense. So I think that there needs to be a reworking of how schools are paid for so that there's equity in in the price of how much is going to each kid for school. Okay.
Okay. Okay, thanks a lot, Rachel. Okay, let's go to the responses from panelists. Let's see, Dave, I'm going to have you go last. So let's start with Karen Francisco. Do you have any thoughts about anything that the last several questions and comments have been?
Well, Rachel's point about suburban schools, we spend millions and millions on standardized testing, but really you can just look at the socioeconomic background. Kids who grew up in suburbs have advantages that kids in urban areas don't have. So absolutely funding is a big piece of this, but I think in some cases the charter schools that I was talking about, the right wing variety, these are generally affluent parents who are trying to escape their existing schools. And we need to be very aware this is happening.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. Okay, Cassandra Ulbrich.
Yeah, so a theme that I kind of heard there a little bit was about both testing and funding. So let me just share that in Michigan, and a lot of states actually did this, and I think it was regarding the race to the top funding. We had to come up with these top to bottom lists, and we started ranking schools based on test scores. And, if you did a scatter plot on a piece of paper, you would see there's an absolute correlation between the level of students in poverty and where they're going to fall within that top to bottom list. So if you could identify the percentage of students that, for example, qualified for free and reduced lunch, you could almost with pinpoint accuracy determine where they were going to fall on that top to bottom list. So standardized testing is not really testing knowledge or skill, it's testing poverty. And that is one thing that I think we need to keep in mind. And when we start creating either support systems, hopefully, but in the case of what a lot of states did, negative consequences, what you're really doing is you're punishing schools and districts who are serving students with the highest needs, and that is counterproductive. So that's my take on that.
Okay, we're going to skip over Chris Bayron because he's already made a comment. But G2 Brown, could you comment on anything that you've heard in the last several people? Oh, G2 is off. Okay, so let's go back up to Dave Cash.
I don't really have anything to add to what people said.
Okay, good enough. I just say this about testing. When I taught in a community college and I taught at other schools, I always loved to emphasize how the IQ test had the racial bias into it. It's built into the very structure of the test, and so the standardized tests that are used, virtually always have very heavily biased information. We're going to hear from Maureen Doyle of the Green Rainbow Party of Massachusetts, and then after that will be Barbara Laxon. Okay, Maureen?
Okay, hi. I'm Maureen Doyle from the Green Rainbow Party of Massachusetts. And the town that I live in, Southbridge, our public schools are in receivership. The Louisiana speaker mentioned receivership. I'm not, if not all of you are familiar with it. A charter school is in the next town, and the town has to pay the transportation for students who want to go to the charter school and any other school choice. So how is Southbridge gonna focus on getting out of receivership if it has to pay the receivers half of the receiver's salary and has its best students siphoned off to the charters and school choice? I think it's terrible. The public schools were fine. I graduated from them. My sister graduated from them. We both went on to college. They were fine. I don't know what happened. But it's a terrible situation that we're spending all this money to send our students to the charter school. They should go to the public school.
Okay.
What's up? Get your long.
Okay, so we heard from Maureen. Now we're going to Barbara Laxon, and after Barbara, we'll go to Green Party of Washington with Cody Mahar Kajos. Okay, go ahead, Barbara Laxon.
Yeah, hi. I'm a retired occupational therapist, and I worked at least 50% of the time with pediatrics. And although I did not work in the school system that much, I knew a number of people who did, and they were always complaining about the fact that charter schools did not accept special needs students, that therapists were not hired to work in the charter schools to give what care was needed, and that and that's a lot of what I had to say, and most of what I had to say was already said and well said by, most of the people speaking. But the whole idea that they can pick and choose their students and then they can sit back and say, oh, well, look what a great school we have. Well, look at our great grades and, all of this other stuff. And there's so many there are even more issues than I realized listening to the speakers today. And
30 seconds, Barbara.
I'm sorry, what?
You have 30 seconds left.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, like I said, most of the things that I wanted to say have already been said. So I'm good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. We're next going to hear from Cody from the Green Party of Washington, and after that, we'll hear from Sue Edward of the Kansas City Green Party. Cody Mahar Kajos. Am I pronouncing your name right or not?
It's Cody Mayarchos.
Cody Mayarchos. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. So first, I want to say thank you for hearing our educational struggles with Trump's executive order, which is going to dismantle the Department of Education, that puts funding for public education back on the states. And my state is currently, Washington State is currently facing anywhere from a 12 to $16 billion shortfall over the next 4 years. Our newest governor has only put forth like a plan to do furloughs for state employees, which would include teachers, and budget cuts, which would include bonuses that are given to teachers for the board tests. So we are putting together a movement. Oh, and those that would only cover about 4 billion of the projected 12 to 16 billion, while rejecting proposals to tax basically tax the rich after a certain like a wealth tax.
Cody,
Meanwhile,
Cody, you have 30 seconds.
So we are working to put together a movement that is to unite the working class, because education affects both sides of the aisle. It's nonpartisan, and looking at alternative ways to do education outside of traditional means. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Cody. Next, we're going to hear from Sue Edward of the Kansas City Green Party, and we'll take a break to hear from our panelists, and then we'll come back and hear from James Anila of the Eco-Socialist Green Party of Eastern Missouri. Okay, Sue, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Don. Hi, everyone. I'm Sue Edward. I'm a member of the Kansas City Green Party, and I want to thank the panelists tonight on their presentations on charter schools and privatization of our public schools. At the same time, government entities are incentivizing parents not to send their children to public schools. And two examples are vouchers. They're marketed as providing parents with, quote, school choice. And with vouchers, public monies are being used for parents to send their children to private schools, which could include religious schools, in violating the separation of church and state. And another way is that parents in 16 states are able to take tax deductions on their state income taxes for homeschooling their children. So in these two methods, take kids out of public schools. So I'd love to hear panelists' thoughts on these. Thank you.
Okay, great. We're going to go to panelists that will be starting off with Cassandra Ulbrich. But first of all, I want to make a comment about public schools versus charter schools. That it's shocking to me that environmentalists virtually never bring this up, even members of the Green Party. And that is when I was a child, and I went to school in Houston, Texas, and the entire time I was in elementary school, I never took a bicycle or a car to school. I walked every single time. When I was in middle school, I rode a bicycle to school every day. I never had a ride in a car going to middle school unless it was pouring down raining. And it was only when I went to high school that I actually had a car. I actually had someone drive me to school. Now, environmentalists should be slightly concerned about the fact that charter schools draw from a very large area, and a very huge proportion of people have to drive the car, putting an unnecessary amount of fossil fumes into the air. Neighborhood schools, even if all the other things were ignored, and they should not be ignored, but despite all that, the charter school is very much of an anti-environmental, pro-global warming perspective. Okay, I want to start off with the panelists going to Cassandra Ulbrich, and then we'll rotate through the others. Okay.
Yeah, so there's some questions about special education and charter schools. And just to be clear, charter schools, as quote unquote public schools, are required to follow federal law. So IDEA would be one of those federal laws that they have to follow. And in Michigan, we would also often hear from the charter schools that if you look at percentages of kids with IEPs, the percentages in charter schools were, they were lower than the traditional schools, but they were still very close. And so at one point we said, well, let's digest that information a little bit. And so we looked at not just the percentage of students with an IEP or an individualized education plan, but the significance of, say, what that IEP meant. And so what we found was in charter schools, there would be kids with IEPs that maybe had to have a couple special accommodations, but they weren't significant. Whereas in the traditional public school, there were kids with, say, significant cognitive issues that required, major accommodations and assistance throughout the day. And so when you broke it down, while the quote unquote percentages may have looked very similar, the services being offered were vastly, vastly different. And we had one member of the State Board of Education whose son was severely autistic. And she mentioned that she had attempted to get her son into many charter schools and was actually on many occasions told, we really don't have the services for your child. The place that has them is the traditional public school down the street, and that's where you should take that. And I heard from many parents that they would get the same counseling, if you will, from the charter school. So while yes, the charter schools are required to follow the same laws, the reality is that oftentimes parents with children with very special needs are counseled out of charter schools.
Okay, thank you very much.
Really interesting.
Chris Barron? Chris, are you there? Okay, if we lost Chris, let's go to Dave Cash.
Yeah, I appreciate that people are naming a lot of different ways that public school is under attack, public education is under attack, and there definitely are lots of ways. It's like not one way that it's happening. And what Cassandra just said about counseling out isn't really an option in New Orleans since the schools are all charter. So there's like you'd just be counseling them out to another charter school, and that's because of they've created a mechanism where it's pretty hard to just get rid of a kid you don't want to serve. But schools, that doesn't mean that schools then turn around and do the right thing and actually serve them well. That's still a big problem in New Orleans as well with special education. So yeah, I'm glad people are raising these issues. Let's keep talking about this and let's organize.
Okay, great. Okay, Karen Francisco.
Oh,
I'm
just
sorry, Dave Cash. Dave Cash. Okay, Karen, go ahead.
just following up on what Cassandra said. Charter schools love to boast that they can educate students for less dollars than traditional schools. And that's why. I mean, they are counseling out those students. I have talked to countless special education parents over the years who've been told, we just don't have the services for your child at our school. They'll be happier in a district school. And so that child is served in a traditional school, and the cost goes to that traditional school. And meanwhile, the charter school can say, look, we are much more of a deal for taxpayers than traditional public schools. But that's the kind of games they play.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to several other people with a comment. James Anla with the Eco-Socialist Green Party of Eastern Missouri, and then we're going to go to Daryl Mach of the DC Statehood Green Party. Okay, James?
Hey, yeah. I was going to talk about special education actually, because I have been working in special education for about 15 years in public schools, and kind of a lot of what I was going to say just came up. So but basically, yeah, I feel like if you have a student who needs special education, public schools are the place that they will get whatever they need. And it's not just, at least in my experience, if a student needs any kind of services in public schools, they will get them because it's just if it makes sense for them to have it, they will receive those services because it's not for profit. Um, it's really just about whatever the student needs. And I feel like that's a lot of the discussion that just happened, I think really probably said what I'm trying to say even better. But that's where you want your kids, it seems like, if they have any special needs, that public schools give them a great a great opportunity and a great education because the resources that they need are provided with just by them needing it. That's all that it really takes.
Okay, James, that's really right to the point. Repeating what a lot of people said, but I think very succinctly and very clearly. Okay, let's go to the Statehood Green Party with Daryl Mach. Tell me if I'm pronouncing, and then we'll have Debbie Anderson, who's also a statehood but has worked with the New York Green Party. Okay, Daryl, tell me how to pronounce your last name.
It's Daryl Moke.
Daryl Moke. Okay.
Moke, like mocha without the A.
Okay, go ahead.
So, as I'm listening to this, and again, appreciate everyone that's been hearing what's been said, DC is in a slightly unique kind of place. From reports and information, one of the first where a lot of this was playing itself out in the country and leading in some ways and not leading in many, many, many others. We've had lots of fights and arguments about the charter system, all of that over time. Right now, what we are experiencing is a blending of the public school and charter school system, where they are half of our students on one set and the other half are in the other. We are still battling and worry and dealing with my biggest issue, both as a candidate and as a part of this of my party, and just as a resident in DC. My biggest issue has been money following the student. So if a student leaves, goes to a charter program, charter school doesn't have to keep them, doesn't have to deal with the other things that public schools deal with in terms of behavior and special ed and other kinds of needs that might be. They're even being gifted and needing more. They don't have to deal with those things, and they can expel or discharge a student, and that student goes back into the regular public system, particularly, or another charter, and that money that was given does not necessarily follow. There have been some changes in that in terms of how charters are funded and how DC's public schools are funded. There's some issues still around that. We're still working through a lot of that. So there's a lot of work yet to be done, but it seems to be that people here have, it's an issue, but it is not it's because of the way people are being convinced about how good it is. Thank you. They are, it doesn't always rise up to the top of the list of concerns, but remains one for those of us that are activists in the community. I'll make one little footnote about magnet schools. Where I'm from, I grew up in Los Angeles, and our magnet school program was a part of the public school program. So it was not charter and couldn't be seen in any way like a charter school. They were magnet schools. Some schools had two, the regular public and the magnet school. We called it the regular school and the magnet school, and we were on one campus together. But magnet schools were always a part of the regular public school system, and it did not take away from the financing to that school, but those were specifically designed for STEM, arts, other kinds of humanities, different kinds of focus side that people would have in those different areas. So that's one of those things around the magnet schools that I've actually championed and believe that model gives us what the charter schools claim to be doing, but inside the public school system, which
okay. Daryl, thank you very much. Okay, next we're going to hear from Debbie Anderson, who's also with DC Statehood and New York Green Party, and then we'll hear from Jennifer Sullivan from the Green Party of Florida. Okay, Debbie. We have.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My experiences that I'll be talking about are with DC. A colleague of mine, her husband is a high school teacher here in DC, and he talked an awful lot to me about how the best students and the money are funneled away from the public schools here and are funneled into these charter schools. My knowledge from talking to him was slightly old, so I reached out to a former neighbor who is a current teacher in the system, and she was verifying, yes, the better students and the money go to the charter schools. What she said something else though that I thought was really profound. First of all, that all teachers are at will, so they can't unionize. They don't have any real rights. And also that the public charter schools here gear their hours toward working families, so the childcare issues aren't the kind of problems that some other people might have in public schools. And what that said to me, I mean, good Marxist that I am, that I've heard a lot of discussion about race tonight, but I come from issues as more of class. And it seems like there is definitely the issue in DC that we are being divided by class.
Don, you're muted. Don, you're muted.
Okay, great. Okay, so do we have, I can't see Jennifer Sullivan. Are you on by any chance, Jennifer? Okay. If not, we'll go to Nikhil Ananda of the Green Party of Hawaii. Nikhil Ananda.
Thank you, Don. Aloha and good afternoon from Maui. And mahalo for all of the previous comments. I was a teacher for many years at a small college in Washington, D.C. I was a math teacher at Job Corps. Plus, for many, many years, I was a public school long-term substitute teacher, mostly at the high schools. I led the efforts at both the public school substitute teachers and at the academic staff at the Maui site of Hawaii Job Corps to unionize. Sadly, both were unsuccessful. I've been a Green since 1992, over 33 years. I've been a candidate for both local and state offices. I was a county and state co-chair, and now I'm the longtime delegate from Hawaii to the National Committee of the Green Party of Hawaii. Hawaii is the only state that has a single state-run public education school system. The charter schools in Hawaii are part of the DOE state system. Hawaii has 258 public schools within the Hawaii State Department of Education. This statewide school district also includes 38 charter schools, bringing the total number of schools to 295, and they're all part of the state single public education system.
You have 30 more seconds.
There are also 7 Hawaii immersion charter schools in Hawaii. These schools operate under the jurisdiction of the Hawaii State Board of Education, and the Hawaii State Department of Education also operates 22 Hawaiian language immersion school sites. There are private schools, Montessori schools, Waldorf schools, religious schools, plus Kamehameha school system, which is a system which requires at least one Hawaiian ancestor to be able to go to Kamehameha schools. Thank you. And I have another meeting to go to, so I'm going to sign off soon. So thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Let's go to our panelists. Let's see, Dave Cash. Any comments about anything you've heard from the last several speakers, last several commenters?
I wanted to talk about what Debbie said about DC. So I think I heard you say, Debbie, that one of the things you said was that the teachers there can't unionize in charter schools. I think I heard you say that. Well, if that's what you said,
Yes,
yeah. So I wanted to correct that because I know charter school teachers in DC who have unionized, and there's in fact I think 3 charter schools in DC right now that already have unionized. Mundo Verde is one of them, and I can't remember the names of the other 2. But yeah, so there is a path to unionizing for teachers in charter schools in DC. It already happened. Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification. I will pass that on to the teachers that I got that from too. Thank you.
Yeah, they can, and that's a common thing we hear in New Orleans a lot is that teachers at charter schools get told by their leaders, charter school leaders, often like you can't join a union, you're not allowed to be in a union because you work at a charter school. That's not true. Definitely. The Constitution protects our right to assembly and association, and we're allowed to be in a union if we want to. And in most places, charter school teachers can can organize a union and win collective bargaining rights in a contract. So not everywhere, but in most places.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Okay, Karen Francisco.
I really don't have anything else to, oops. I really don't have anything else to add, and I'm going to have to go here before too long. Just wanted to say thank you very much. This has been a fascinating discussion, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, Cassandra Ulbrich.
Same, nothing else to add.
Okay, is there anybody here who has not has not had an opportunity to make a comment or ask a question who would like to do so? Okay, Kim Sipes, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Don. I think thanks to everybody. This has been a phenomenal webinar. I'm glad to hear all this stuff. But and at the risk of killing some good vibes, I want to bring out another layer that's not been touched on tonight, and that is we've not talked about anything about the U.S. position in the world and the fact that the U.S. has been trying to dominate the world since 1945. What this means is there's been a tremendous amount of money, and we keep coming back needing more money for the schools, that goes to the military. And as a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, I strongly think we've got to take on the military. They don't do anything but kill and destroy. Trump wants to raise the defense budget, which is already insane at $850 billion a year. He wants to raise it by another $150 billion to $1 trillion a year for the U.S. military. Now, if we're sending that money to the military, that can't be used for our schools in any way. It can't be used for improving our communities and dealing with climate change, infrastructure, anything. I think those of us who deem ourselves progressive or leftist or whatever, we've got to take this issue on. That we can't be trying to dominate the world and take care of people, good people in this country and others. We can do one or the other. We can't do both, and we've got to take that on. So I'm not going to beat it to death. I don't expect anybody to comment on it tonight, although they're welcome. But I think the idea that we've got to take this level on, we've got to look at this as something we need to approach in the future. Thank you all very much. And again, thanks for a wonderful conversation.
Hey, Kim, I think you know very well that I'll be happy to respond to what you say, whether I disagree totally or agree totally. Now, this just happens to be one of the times that we totally agree on everything, because the thing is that we haven't touched the idea of degrowth in this webinar, but we've had multiple webinars where we talk about the true environmental need is not to replace fossil fuel colonialism with electronic colonialism. That's not getting rid of colonialism. It's just giving it a new form. The only way to solve environmental crisis is to drastically reduce the production of unnecessary crap. And the number one area of production that needs to be reduced is militarism. It produces actually negative negative productive values because it just destroys other production. So the question is, where are those good people going to go? Many of the people who work in military production are very highly educated and could very quickly be learn how to teach in many schools. And so, in addition to a shorter work week, for all workers as a path to degrowth, retraining, expanding schools, public schools, decreasing class size, and hiring more people in public schools is really one of the best ways to deal with degrowth. Is there anybody else? I think Barbara Chicario wants to make a comment.
Yeah, I want to make a quick comment. This discussion has been fascinating, and it took me back to 1974, 75, when I was working in Maryland in a private school. Well, no, it wasn't. It was a county-run school for people with disabilities, all kinds of disabilities. And what we had were students, from elementary through high school, we had adults in the program, but the school age folks were not allowed to attend public schools because they didn't have any special services. And the right to education was passed, I think, in 1975. And we lost about 3/4 of our students. Thankfully, they went into public education. And I just had this chill that ran over me that this privatization of schools is really, again, we're going to revisit that time when all of our students weren't embraced, where, where the kids with special needs aren't going to get the services they need. It is chilling. And I have a friend here in St. Louis that worked in the public schools, and he said this ominous thing would happen. They'd lose all their kids, a good portion of the kids to charter schools. And there was a date, and I don't know the date, but it was late in the fall when the funding from the state would go to the charter schools. And he said literally they knew the next week that they would be receiving these kids that were high needs kids with a lot of different issues. And the charter schools, after they got their funding from the state, they'd say, we can't provide the services you need, go back to public schools. So this is huge. And it really, I feel like this whole step towards charters is very dark and taking us back to a time before the right to education. But thank you. This has been a great, great discussion.
Okay. Anybody else who has not said anything before? I see Rachel really wants to say something. But anybody who hasn't said anything, we got to give priority to those people. I don't see anybody who hasn't said anything. Oh, I guess we'll just have to hear from Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
So Kim Sipes really touched on something that I have been thinking a lot about for the last several years. And as a homeschool mother, I have had to sift through curricula and try to find the best options. And I have learned about Singapore, and I'm such a big fan of Singapore. They don't have a military. They have invested all that money that they would have put into their military over the last 50 years into educating their population. They don't have natural resources to talk about. They have a tiny country and they put all this money into education, and they have an amazing education system where they actually have visiting teachers that will give you feedback after you're done with your lesson, and they'll have 3 teachers in a classroom, and they have the best teachers in the world. And I actually have Singapore math that I teach my own kid. And so they actually, because they have invested all this money in finding ways to educate children so well, they've been able to export their curriculum to other places. And so let's be more like Singapore.
Okay. Okay. Now I think one last call for anybody who has not had a chance to say anything. Going once, going twice. Okay. We heard from Rachel. Okay. We heard. Oh, does Daryl want to say something else? Okay. I think we're getting close to the end of this webinar, but I would hate to deny Daryl the right to make a closing comment. Daryl.
You know what? Because we were in this space, and I appreciated what Rachel just said, and I put something in the chat about my daughter, but I just want to encourage people to also think we talk often about different styles of education, but we do not talk often about Black and Indigenous styles of education, so like African styles and learning methods and all that. And I would encourage us to move out of the Euro and Euro influence-centric types of education systems and look at other systems around the world that may be working as well that we don't lift up. So we talk about classics. What classics are we talking about? We talk about certain things. What are we talking about? And that often does not include things from Black and brown folks outside of the Americas or European approval. So I just want to throw that out there for us to consider as we talk about education and what's important in our systems.
Yeah, Daryl, that just brings to mind something that I learned about when I was writing my book about Cuban medical care. And one of the ways that Cubans, when somebody's getting through medical school, they have a completely different system of examination than the American medical school, which is all highly standardized tests. And one of the sorts of questions that you might see on a Cuban final exam, where they students are taught to to practice medicine in far corners of the world, in slum areas, in jungle areas, in areas where you don't have resources. And one of the questions might be something like, okay, you have a patient who has just had a broken arm, and you don't have any access to medical equipment because you're completely away from any sort of clinic or hospital. What do you do for somebody with a broken arm when you have no access to medical facilities? And it's just, you couldn't imagine that in an American educational system, because every medical school, it assumes that you have the most expensive equipment anywhere in the world, and you never have to think creatively about how to deal with the problem. And so I think that dovetails a lot with the sort of thing that you're suggesting. There's a lot of ways to think about problems, and in the American education. So what Jitu said, is very important. It's not just a revolution in our rights as parents, as teachers, as students, and our rights as education workers, but it's our responsibility to completely reconceptualize what education is. And I like for these discussions to go on and on, for 3 hours or so. And people always yell at me, Don, you let that thing go on too long. So I think it's time to bring this to a close. I hope everybody's cool with that, but I think that everybody's been given a chance to provide their input. And I want to thank people very, very much for participating. We had a lot of comments from a lot of people, and I think it was very, very good. And so don't forget, June the 4th, next time, we're going to have Alice Green is coordinating the program on toxins. So be sure to tune in for that. Keep an eye out for that one. Okay. I want to thank everybody and have a good night, except unless you're in Hawaii, and then you have a good afternoon.
Thank you.